In this video, I'm going to teach you how to think about past work in a way that will help you make it feel current. And so we're going to take a look at this portfolio, which is tailored to a very specific design skill set, which is graphic work. And I'm going to talk to you about how this outdated portfolio that's a few years old could be tweaked to better represent the designer's current skill set. So this portfolio was made for an interview in which I had to uh, illustrate my graphic skills for the purpose of being able to teach very beginning drawing classes to my students. Now, this was probably 10 years ago, and so there wasn't quite as much development in my work, but I do think that this portfolio does have some really strong points in it. So I'm imagining that I'm going to be presenting a portfolio of my graphic skills now, and I want to see what of this portfolio could remain and what I need to change so that it's a little bit more representative of my current skill set. Now, one thing that I think works really well from a holistic point of view of this portfolio is on the left side, you can see there's a wayfinding device here. And this kind of functions as a table of contents, but look as I scroll ahead through the pages, look at the text on the left-hand side and see what happens. Do you see how it highlights based on what's being shown at the right? This part works really, really well, and I like that part a lot. You can see the background's got a little bit of a texture added to it, so it's got kind of a soft linen applied, and that part also I still like. I think it still reflects my taste as far as a little bit more of a soft, natural approach to presenting my work instead of that really crisp, um, modern minimalist aesthetic. But I will say that in looking at this fonts, the fonts that are shown here on this page, there's definitely not an understanding of font families that I didn't develop until later in my career as I spoke to more and more graphic designers. So even though I still really like both of these fonts, I don't think that they work as well together. I like the kind of hand looseness and artistic effect of the font on the right hand side because this portfolio really is balanced more towards hand renderings, and so that kind of conveys that look a little bit. But the text on the left hand side is a little bit traditional and a little bit stuffy for how I feel now. And so I think probably the serif font and the all capital letters feels a little bit too kind of formal for the look that I want to convey. Now, if I look on this page, I do really like that the information on the right-hand side tells the media that I used, because this is really, really helpful for people to know kind of what you used. Sometimes it's obvious in a rendering, but sometimes it's not. I do think, though, in this particular portfolio, there's an overemphasis on the medium here. You can see based on the hierarchy of information, the size of that text where it says pen and pencil on paper is pretty large, almost as, or it's as large as the font on the left-hand side. And so I think this would work better if there was a little bit more of an understanding of hierarchy and the labeling of the media maybe came down at the bottom in very small text. What I would replace that block of text with is some information more about the project, because unless you really know what this project was, these renderings don't have a whole lot of meaning to them. These are really loose sketches, and they fit actually about in the palm of my hand. They're very, very small, but they were the initial planning sketches for a hotel that was designed. So we're looking at the lobby and uh, the bar area, and it looks like the seating area in the lower left-hand corner. Now, what's neat about these sketches is that they're really loose to look at. They're done in 60 seconds or less, but I actually have the final renderings of these that are full color and that were done in 11 by 17 hand renders that I did. And so I think it'd be fun to show kind of both of those as uh, different stages of the same drawing. So I think this could be built up a little bit more with information that I didn't have at the time that this portfolio was created, but I do have now. And then I think a description of the project would be really helpful here as well. So these are texture studies that I did my freshman year of college. So these are almost 20 years old now, but they still look really good. I'm still really proud of them. So I think these are going to stay, but I do think that this one in the the lower row in the middle, the green tile here, it's kind of awkward the way that the um, tile themselves kind of crops. The edge of the tile themselves and how it's got really soft fading to almost give a three-dimensional handmade quality here. I've always loved that about this swatch. But the really kind of strict edge here that I have really seems to be in direct contrast with the softness of the material. So I'm going to look for this drawing one more time and see if I have the originals and see, now that I know Photoshop better, if I can crop this image more effectively, because at the time that I made this, um, I didn't know Photoshop as well, but I think now if there's something on the edge of this that I don't really that I wasn't able to treat very well at the time that I made this page, I'd like to refresh my memory about how it looks, and maybe I can do something with it. The rest of these look really nice. However, there's now that I'm thinking about this, there was so much more involved in the making of these swatches than just marker on graphics paper. There was pen here, there was colored pencil, there was you know, marker, there was definitely some I think some oil pastels as well. So I think I'm kind of underselling the media here, and I think that these textures are still really strong, and I'm still proud to have them in my portfolio. But I do think that this page could get a little bit more, have a little bit more impact. Okay, this is another drawing from very, very early in my design career when I was a student, but I think these still look great. They're not at all in my taste though, and they're pretty traditional. So I think that this shows a good skill level, that I know how to manipulate a pencil, but I don't really think that these sketches would appeal to a very broad audience because of how um, uh, traditional they are. And as far as reflecting my taste, they're sort of a little bit too sweet and traditional. This doesn't reflect my style anymore. This was drawn for the bedroom of a young girl. And so even though these are really nicely done, I don't think they really reflect much about me anymore, except for the fact that I know how to use a pencil. And probably as as I bring in better drawings, a viewer will realize that if I can do really beautiful, high quality renderings with a marker, I probably know how to do it in a pencil as well. So I'm going to get rid of these. Okay, these are another set of loose renderings. Now, these were based on photographs of an interior that I was hired to do renderings for. And I had some information from the client, but I really had to extract a lot on my own. And these renderings were supposed to look really loose because they were at a schematic stage, where they had the client who asked me to do these was an architecture firm who still hadn't really um, signed on to the project yet. So that's why these are really kind of intentionally loose. But I like the looseness of them. I like the technique of them, but I do think that they feel kind of empty and lonely for a successful bar, which is what we were trying to sell the client on. So I think I'm going to come back to these and maybe add some scale figures in Photoshop, just some silhouettes of people that make these spaces look a little bit more full. I'm going to place the scale figures in such a way that it covers up my existing scale figures because I don't think that they're as high quality as a really nice digital version would be. I also think I might give a little bit more information about the project itself, and I'm going to try to find some pieces of furniture and some examples of finishes to bring in as some swatches for this because at the time they were not selected, but because of the looseness of this rendering, you don't have a lot of information on the type of finishes that are here. And I think it would make this page look better, even if I did after the fact selected, a black velvet chair upholstery, maybe a beautiful flooring finish that looked like what I've rendered here, just to kind of make the connection between what a viewer would see here and what a viewer and a visitor to the space might experience. These are some other great renderings. I've always loved these. These are really old, but these were done uh, as a way to to study color and texture and lighting. And I think they still hold up really well, but I have a lot more renderings of pen and marker on vellum because at the time that I created these, this was the first time I had really done them, but I discovered that I really liked using marker on vellum instead of graphics paper. And so that was what I started to use for many times after that. And so I'm going to add more to this sheet and maybe increase the size of this one on the upper left because I think that's the best one, and maybe reduce the size of this one because you can see it's got a little bit more hard lines, a little bit less of the really subtle and soft fading that I developed as a skill later on. And so I'm going to keep these, but I'm gonna bring more into this page. Okay, this last page was when I was barely familiar with Revit, and we had to create a pop-up shop within a mall that had been kind of just abandoned. And so this is a really uninspiring space with what I still think is a cool pop-up shop inside of it. But these renderings are kind of bad for a lot of reasons. The first is that it's an under developed space as far as the finishes go around this pop-up shop that I've created. These scale figures are in appropriate positions and they're dressed appropriately for the space, but they're a little bit too bright. They almost have this kind of ransom note effect where they just kind of look like they've been stuck in there. So if I were going to keep this in my portfolio, I would lighten up those scale figures, bring the opacity in Photoshop down to maybe 80%. And I would crop a little bit more along the top and side so that it's focused more on the rendering here that I created. And then I would probably enlarge it just a little bit. This effect over here is uh, was a skill set where we were trying to make a digital rendering feel warmer and a little bit more artistic. And so you can see there's some like coffee stains here on this side. I think that this is a really fun effect, but for the type of rendering that this is, where it's a, kind of a high-tech space, it's not really selling the rendering very well or the effect very well. So I'm going to take all of these drawings out with the exception of just a really close crop maybe of this one. I think this kind of makes it look a little bit more warmer because it's been put through a Photoshop filter, this whole rendering. So I'm going to pull this out and keep it on this page, get rid of these two, and then I'm going to put in a couple more recent renderings now that my Revit skills have improved quite a bit, and that's what I'm going to use for this page. So now you can see that in this portfolio, it's really tailored to a very specific set of design skills. And so this portfolio was tailored to a job where I was just being hired to teach people how to draw in lots of different ways. And so it's not a portfolio of all of my design skills. It's very specific to one job where I'm trying to draw that connection between myself and an employer. But you can see here that even though there's a lot of things in this portfolio that I love that I still think really represent my skill set. It's not a current representation of what I can do now. So it's important for me to look at this, save the things that work. Don't lose that time that I spent creating those gorgeous marker renderings, but really just see the strength in them and leverage that strength into what my skill set is now.